I was originally nothing more than a statue without consciousness. Yet even the heavenly Tao could do nothing to me, because I was the very first human ever created by Nua. Back when she made me, she had no experience, so I ended up with only an outward form and no awareness of my own. After Nua became a saint and ascended, she forgot all about me. Later, the human race remembered that I was, after all, the first human created by the Holy Mother, so they placed me behind the statues of Holy Mother Nua and Sage Laozi. And just like that, I stood in this world for hundreds of years. But on this day, a thick, overwhelming stench of blood woke me up. The moment I opened my eyes, I saw hundreds of humans kneeling before the statues of Nua and Laozi. Great saints, please hear your children's prayers. Descend with your holy might and save the human race. Their desperate voices reached my ears, and from their pleas alone, I could tell the human race was facing disaster. But no matter how hard they begged, neither Nua's statue nor Laozi's statue gave any response. At that moment, someone finally could not hold back any longer and stood up. Holy Mother Sage, please don't let the two races slaughter humans at will and refine weapons from us. Now tens of thousands of humans have already been massacred. Are you really going to watch the human race be wiped out? The moment I heard those words, I finally understood why the smell of blood on this mountain was so suffocating. Damn the Wu clan and the Demon clan. As the first human of the primordial world, the thought of humanity being driven to extinction filled me with a rage and killing intent that shot straight into the heavens. But I was only a statue. I could do nothing. Just as I was lamenting the imminent destruction of the human race, a beam of light suddenly descended from the sky and shone onto me. In the next instant, my consciousness was pulled into a mysterious space. Inside that space, a mysterious voice appeared. Host, even the heavenly Tao covets your existence. I now bestow upon you the supreme domain, divine ability. Within your territory, all laws are barred. No power may invade, and you are eternally invincible. Your initial territory spans Tenjang, and the more enemies you kill, the larger it will become. At that same time, demon qi surged violently from the foot of the mountain, mixed with wave after wave of miserable screams. Humanity had only been born not long ago. Although humans were born with Tao bodies, they were still unbearably weak. In only a few breaths, thousands of humans, drenched in blood, retreated all the way to the mountaintop. Lady Nua, Sage Laozi, please save the human race. If you still refuse to act, then we really will be exterminated. The humans shouted in unison, but still no answer came. The demons who had chased them up the mountain saw this and burst into laughter. They had already come fully prepared to wipe humanity out. In that moment, every surviving human sank into despair. Just as the demons were about to strike, I stepped out from behind the humans, passed through the crowd, and shielded every last one of them behind me. The surviving humans were all stunned beyond words when they saw me. The statue had come to life. The two men and one woman who had originally been standing at the very front of the humans opened their mouths, but for a moment, none of them knew what to say. I spoke calmly. All of you, get behind me. After hearing my words, the three human ancestors immediately led the others to retreat to the rear. But the demons only burst into even louder laughter. Your human race is nothing but a swarm of ants, and you're just a slightly stronger ant. Is that so? Then come and try. The summit of Kongtong Mountain was now my domain. Even though it only covered a radius of 10 zhang, protecting the humans behind me was more than enough. The demon commander flew into a rage. A mere ant dares provoke me? With a wave of his hand, he gave the order to massacre everyone. Under his command, the demon troops rushed forward in excitement, surging toward the humans like a black tide. In the blink of an eye, they were right in front of me. I remained perfectly calm and quietly calculated the distance. Then, the instant they stepped into my domain, I said in a low voice, "Human domain. Flying is forbidden." The moment my words fell, an invisible ripple spread through the surroundings. Every demon soaring through the air dropped at once like dumplings falling into a pot. The three human ancestors stared with their mouths wide open, their faces full of disbelief. The lead demon general's expression changed drastically. He had not sensed even the slightest trace of magic power from me, so he could not understand why every demon who got close to me suddenly fell from the sky. As for the demons trapped inside the domain, terror filled their hearts. Why can't we fly anymore? Even newly transformed little demons can fly. What the hell is going on? Could it be Lady Nua and Sage Laozi have taken action? The more they thought about it, the more terrified they became. Lady Nua, Sage Laozi, we'll leave at once. If saints had really intervened, then it was obvious they intended to protect these thousands of humans. The demons might be simple-minded, but they were not stupid enough to clash head-on with saints, so they immediately turned to flee. Right then, my cold voice rang out. Who said you could leave? As soon as the words fell, another invisible wave spread out in an instant. Every demon was shocked to discover that they could no longer move. Only then did they finally realize that the one who had forbidden their flight and bound their bodies was not some saint at all, but me, the very human they had looked down on as an ant. The leading great demon roared and immediately ordered the demon soldiers to attack me with long-range spells. Every demon gathered energy and aimed it at me. But just as their power reached its peak and they were about to fire, I casually said, "Human domain. Magic is forbidden." That single sentence left them completely dumbfounded. They were still frozen in attacking poses, and even though their spells were fully charged, they could not mobilize a single bit of it. Every demon's pupils widened as they stared at me in horror. At that moment, forget flying. Even moving a finger was impossible for them. They could only stand there stiffly like wooden stakes. One demon trembled as he spoke. "Human, let us go. We'll leave right now." They were clearly afraid, but it was already too late. The moment a thought moved through my mind, those 100 demon soldiers exploded on the spot and vanished between heaven and earth. That bizarre scene made every remaining demon turn pale in terror, and even the humans watching from behind me were so shocked that they were completely speechless. Their ancestor was terrifying beyond belief. As large numbers of demons were wiped out, the system's voice rang out in my mind again. "You have obtained sufficient energy. Your invincible domain has been upgraded to level 2. Domain range increased to 100 zhang." Hearing that notification, the corners of my mouth rose slightly. While the humans looked at the corpses covering the ground and cheered for this hard-won victory, a deafening roar suddenly tore through the sky. The sound was so loud that the entire earth began to shake violently. A giant demon in golden armor appeared, leading a vast demon army from every mountain ridge. The moment they saw that scene, the humans behind me were filled with fear and shrank behind my back without daring to show their faces. One of the 3 human ancestors lowered his voice and explained, "That is the demon commander responsible for this slaughter of our people." I gave a slight nod. In the distance, after arriving at the battlefield, the demon commander swept his gaze over everything, yet he could not sense any lingering aura from a powerful expert. Soon, his eyes locked onto the cowering humans, and he let out an angry roar. As he spoke, he took a single step forward and entered my invincible domain. Since he had stepped in on his own, I had no reason to hold back. Before that demon commander could even understand what had happened, he was crushed to pieces on the spot by the power of my domain. Then I turned to look at the remaining demons. At that moment, every single one of them was immobilized where they stood, their pupils shrinking as they stared at me in utter disbelief. Some demons cried out in panic. I stood in the air with my hands behind my back and looked down at them. As long as I guard this place, anyone who dares offend the human race will be killed without mercy. Only then did the humans behind me finally dare to stick their heads out and look. But before they could relax, several hundred more figures suddenly shot across the sky in the distance at extreme speed. The humans were instantly horrified. "Ancestor, run! The Wu clan army is here!" But I only glanced at them calmly and raised my hand, signaling for everyone to be quiet. The Wu commander arrived with several hundred Wu warriors. When he saw the demons trembling in fear, he gave a cold laugh. "I was wondering who it was. So it's just the little demons of West Demon Mountain. Where is your commander? Tell him to get out here. The Wu clan is taking over this territory." The demon side had already been scared out of their wits, so who still had the mind to answer him? Their silence only enraged the Wu commander even more. With a motion from afar, he grabbed a little demon into his hand. "I'm asking you, where is your commander? Speak." The little demon was so terrified that the skin on his face twitched, and with trembling fingers he pointed at me. He did it." Hearing that, the Wu commander frowned, then mercilessly crushed the little demon's head. When the surrounding demons saw this, the anger they had been suppressing almost burst out of them. Hundreds of demon soldiers drew their weapons and confronted the Wu warriors with savage expressions. The Wu commander glanced over casually and saw that the one standing there was only a human, his face filled with contempt. "The demon race really is trash. You can't even deal with a bunch of ants. And you actually wanted to trick me into believing a human had the power to overturn the heavens." Faced with his mockery, the demons did not dare argue at all and instinctively backed away. Before his words had even fully faded, the Wu commander looked at me again and sneered as he waved his hand. "Perfect. We'll capture this group of humans, rip out their souls, and then deal with these useless wastes from the demon race." The Wu clan's sharp, terrifying laughter echoed between heaven and earth. Thick waves of sinister qi surged wildly forward. Under the Wu commander's order, hundreds of Wu warriors charged straight toward me, each one as fast as lightning, their massive weapons tearing through the air. I rubbed my wrist and muttered softly, "The Wu clan, huh?" The moment those words fell, a heaven-shaking storm suddenly erupted in the sky. In an instant, the hundreds of Wu warriors were erased without a trace. The demons who had not yet fled were utterly horrified. Since when did the human race produce an ancestor this powerful? My sharp gaze swept toward them from the distance, and their scalps immediately went numb. In the next moment, they turned and fled in complete panic. The system's voice rang out again inside my mind. "Congratulations, host. You have obtained energy. Domain upgraded to level 3. Domain range increased to 1,000 zhang." I stood with my hands behind my back, watching my domain grow stronger and more tangible. Now I could protect even more people. The news that the human race had wiped out the commanders of both the Demon Clan and the Wu Clan spread quickly. Kongtung Mountain became the center of attention for all races. My sudden rise as the first human of the primordial world allowed humanity to see hope for the first time. At the foot of Kongtong Mountain, the 3 human ancestors led 3,000 remaining humans and jointly pushed me forward as the supreme of the human race, hoping I could lead humanity to resist the Wu and Demon clans and survive. I looked at the 3 human ancestors, then at the mere 3,000 humans left alive, and a powerful sense of responsibility rose within me. In my previous life, I had read countless novels about the primordial world, and I had seen the scenes of the Wu and Demon clans slaughtering humans over and over again. Back then, I never felt all that much. But now, as the first human of this world, seeing such bloody and cruel scenes with my own eyes, I could not stop the anger from rising inside me. Only now did I truly understand just how miserable humanity had been during this era. Perhaps protecting the human race was the very mission that had brought me here after transmigrating. Seeing that I remained silent, the 3 human ancestors exchanged a glance, then dropped to one knee. Just as people worship heaven and earth, and just as they prayed before Nuwa and Laozi, they bowed deeply and cried out, "Human Supreme, please save us." Their act of kneeling quickly stirred the emotions of the thousands of humans behind them, and soon the voices of the human race spread out from the peak of Kongtong Mountain, echoing over the rivers and mountains. "Human Supreme, please save the human race." I looked at the thousands kneeling before me, and with unwavering eyes I said, "I am the first human of the primordial world. It is my duty to protect humanity." Then, beneath the gaze of everyone present, I stepped forward to the most visible place. And behind me followed the 3 human ancestors, tears shining in their eyes. My words fell over the crowd like a divine chant striking directly into their souls. As the supreme of the human race, I had only one thing to say. The 3,000 humans below stared at me without blinking, their eyes full of curiosity, wanting to know what I, their newly chosen supreme, was about to tell them. My gaze swept over all 3,000 humans, and I spoke slowly, but every word rang out like iron. "Whoever offends the human race, we will fight them to the death." The humans below were all stunned for a moment. "Whoever offends the human race, we will fight them to the death." Until now, all they had thought about was how to stay alive, but their supreme was already thinking about revenge. "Whoever offends the human race will face us to the death." The 3 human ancestors were the first to snap out of their shock. They roared those words with every ounce of strength in their bodies, and their momentum shot straight into the sky. I nodded slightly, then turned to face the heavens and declared in a voice like rolling thunder, "I am the supreme of the human race, and I hereby announce this to the entire primordial world. From this day on, the human race and the Wu and Demon clans will fight to the death." The instant my words fell, thunder boomed, the heavens changed color, and under the leadership of the 3 human ancestors, the 3,000 humans on Kongtong Mountain shouted in unison. At the very same time, 2 more waves of human voices rose from Wuzhuang Temple and Mount Shuyang. In an instant, mountains and rivers resonated, and mysterious golden runes appeared across the sky, glittering like stars against the blue dome above. Golden ripples spread through the entire primordial world, and the pressure of the heavenly Tao burst out from within them, instantly covering heaven and earth. Great powers across the world were shaken. They were shocked, but also confused. A heavenly Tao oath from the human race had actually triggered a heavenly phenomenon. Even I was a little surprised. I glanced toward Wuzhuang Temple and Mount Shuyang, and a faint smile appeared on my face. So there were still surviving humans there. That was truly wonderful news. The human race has declared war on the Wu and Demon clans? Interesting. No one would have imagined that a vow from such a tiny race could stir the heavenly Tao itself. This is unbelievable. I wonder how the Wu and Demon clans will respond. All the races of the primordial world were stunned. And at the same time, they were all curious to see what the Wu and Demon clans would do next. In this age, those 2 races were the absolute rulers of heaven and earth. One ruled the sky and the other governed the land. Now that the human race had openly provoked them, how could they possibly stay silent? Inside the Hall of Ancestral Witches, the 12 ancestral witches had gathered together. Normally, they lived apart in their own tribes, and only when something major happened would Dijiang summon them for discussion. But now, the human race had made a heavenly Tao oath to fight the Wu clan to the death, and that had thoroughly enraged them. Of the 12 ancestral witches, all except Hutu were furious. Among them, Zhurong and Gonggong, the 2 with the hottest tempers, even declared that they would personally lead armies to wipe out the human race. Hutu stopped them with all her strength. "I opposed slaughtering the humans from the very beginning," Hutu said. "And now a human supreme has appeared, one who can even trigger a heavenly Tao phenomenon. Whether it is this human supreme or the human race itself, they are clearly anything but ordinary. Instead of rushing to destroy them, perhaps we should find a way to mend our relationship with them." When the Wu clan had first started slaughtering humans, Hutu had already tried desperately to stop it. Sadly, none of the others had taken her words to heart. The only thing she had been able to do was restrain the Wu of her own tribe and forbid them from killing humans. Dijiang, the ancestral witch of space and the eldest among the 12, fell silent for a moment before finally speaking. A vow from the human supreme that can move the heavenly Tao is indeed not something we can underestimate. But because of that, he must be eliminated. Our Wu clan has already slaughtered countless humans to forge our weapon. There is no room left for reconciliation. Since that is the case, then we destroy them. Zhurong immediately stood up. I'll go myself and exterminate the humans. Gong Gong sneered. Better let me do it. I don't trust you. You dare look down on me? You're both stupid and weak. If you get killed by the humans, won't that disgrace the dignity of us ancestral witches? Then do you dare fight me and see? Why wouldn't I? The other ancestral witches all frowned, already getting headaches. Zhurong, the ancestral witch of fire, and Gong Gong, the ancestral witch of water, had been born around the same time. Their natural attributes opposed each other, and from the very moment they came into existence, they had never gotten along. Neither accepted the other, and both had explosive tempers that could ignite at the slightest spark. Dijiang pressed a hand to his brow, then barked, "Enough!" Zhurong and Gong Gong each gave a cold snort, but in the end, they still sat back down. Dijiang continued, "If destroying a mere few thousand humans requires one of us ancestral witches to personally act, then won't the other races laugh at us? Xiangliang, your younger sister Jufeng, has already stepped into the realm of Great Witch. Have her lead 1,000 Wu warriors to Kongtong Mountain." Qiangliang nodded, then immediately sent a message to his younger sister. Far away in her tribe, Jufeng received the order and at once gathered 1,000 Wu warriors from the tribe of Thunder before setting out for Kongtung Mountain. At the same time, atop Mount Buzhou, within the dazzling and majestic heavenly court, countless demons stood in worship. "The human race's oath has stirred the heavenly Tao," someone said. "What do you all think?" "The human race has only a little over 10,000 members left. Compared to our demon race, the gap between us is like heaven and earth," Fuxi said calmly. "They are not worth fearing?" "In my opinion, this matter does not require much concern." Fuxi was exceptionally wise, so of course he could tell that Dijun had already developed killing intent toward the human race. Among all the great demons present, he was the only one who opposed the demon race's large-scale slaughter of humans. But although he held the title of Shi Emperor, his control over the demon race was limited. Not worth concern? Eastern Emperor Taiyi narrowed his eyes and spoke in a deep voice. "They are only human ants, yet they dare challenge us so openly. If we let this pass, then how will the myriad races continue to respect our demon race in the future?" Demon Master Kunpeng half closed his eyes, looking as if he were on the verge of dozing off. He clearly had little interest in the matter of humans at all. "This matter can be discussed later," Dijun finally said, after glancing at Fuxi and then at Taiyi. Although he had indeed developed the intention to kill the human race, he still needed to keep Fuxi steady. After all, Fuxi would be an important force in the future war against the Wu clan. "Heavenly Emperor, you are wise," Fuxi said, with a cupped fist salute, but inwardly he let out a faint sigh. With his intelligence, how could he possibly fail to understand what Dijun was truly thinking? Taiyi said nothing more in the hall, but the moment he returned to the Eastern Emperor Palace, he summoned the demon marshal Zhu Ying. "Take 1,000 elite demons and head straight to Kongtong. I want to see for myself what kind of so-called supreme dares lead the humans in declaring war on my heavenly court." Taiyi stood with his hands behind his back, majestic even in silence. The terrifying pressure radiating from him made the surrounding demons tremble uncontrollably. Soon, the elite forces sent by the Wu and demon clans tore across the heavens, and the storms raised by their passing triggered mountain floods, landslides, and earth-shaking disasters. Hidden among the wild mountains and forests, the countless races of the world were filled with dread. They all knew what this meant. The Wu and demon clans were furious with the human race, and now they were about to unleash that fury in full. At that same moment, on the summit of Kongtong Mountain, I also sensed that overwhelming demonic pressure rapidly approaching. The instant I looked up, I saw the sky darken as countless demons spread their wings and filled the air, each carrying icy weapons and glaring down with murderous eyes. At their head stood Zhu Ying, whose brows drew together as he shouted, "Wu clan? Why are you here too?" Yu Feng's gaze turned cold. "What business is that of yours?" The fire-like killing intent between them ignited at once. The Wu and demon clans had been bitter enemies for years and had long regarded each other as mortal foes. The only reason they had not started fighting immediately was because both sides had been given direct orders. I rubbed my wrist and stood firm in the wild wind blowing straight toward me. Behind me, the 3,000 humans trembled in the face of thousands of Wu and demons. Yet even so, they still fixed their eyes on me with unwavering determination. Looking at the two leaders still arguing in the sky, I took one step forward and said, "Are you two here as guests?" My voice entered their ears, and Zhu Ying immediately stopped bickering with Jufeng. He turned to me and barked, "I have come under the orders of the Heavenly Emperor. Kneel at once, apologize, and withdraw the Heavenly Tao oath, or your entire race will be slaughtered." Jufeng frowned. But after recalling Dijiang's command, she also spoke in a voice filled with pressure. "By Lord Dijiang's order, kneel and apologize." I laughed. but it was the kind of laugh born from rage. My eyes narrowed, and killing intent erupted around me like a storm as I looked at the Wu and demon armies and said, "When your two clans slaughtered the human race, you justified it with the law of the strong devouring the weak. Now that you stand high above everyone else, how is it that you've forgotten that very same rule? The strong devour the weak?" Jufeng sneered. "Pathetic human ants are fit for only one fate, to die beneath the feet of the Wu clan. You dare disrespect heaven and earth? Today your entire human race will be slaughtered." Zhu Ying was equally enraged. I took a deep breath and accepted a weapon from one of the humans beside me. If even Dijun and Dijong are only this much, then what exactly do I have to fear? The instant they heard that, Zhu Feng and Zhu Ying became even more furious. They had already realized that I was the human supreme. Zhu Feng spread her wings and moved, and in that instant, violent winds tore across Kongtong Mountain. Stones exploded into powder, giant trees were uprooted from the ground, and a terrifying pressure descended like collapsing seas and mountains. With a thunderous crash, more than 1,000 Wu warriors slammed onto the earth, causing the rivers and mountains to quake. The 3,000 humans were thrown to the ground in terror. At the same time, Zhu Ying erupted in rage. His 9 mountain-sized heads swayed in the air, each one flicking its tongue as mist-like flames and watery vapor swirled around him in a scene that was both hazy and terrifying. Roaring at me, he ordered all the demons to slaughter every human here. Thousands of Wu and demons fully unleashed their power at once, turning the entire battlefield into a black tide of terror. Thousands of powerful auras descended together. I raised my right hand and cast protection over every single human. In the next moment, the Wu and demon forces transformed into streaks of dazzling rainbow light and charged straight toward me. Some rushed on foot, some skimmed low over the ground, and with their strength, every step they took was like crossing space itself as they arrived at the edge of my domain. Behind them came the massive body of Zhu Ying, his 9 giant heads swaying like they could blot out the sky itself. Up in the heavens, Jufeng was already preparing to unleash the power of a great witch of thunder. Heavenly lightning stirred, dark clouds gathered with the wind, and Jufeng shot forward, moving several times faster than Zhu Ying. Opening her mouth, she spat out a divine radiant sword that cleaved through the order of the void itself, severing chains of law with metallic explosions as it came crashing down. That terrifying power instantly stirred up a bloody storm, and the land that had only just begun to recover was once again torn into a landscape of devastation. I watched the rushing Wu and demons in silence. By then, everyone was already panicking. They had never seen a battle on such a scale before, and many of them were trembling so badly their legs could barely support them. But just then, when the 3 human ancestors saw that I had not moved, they stepped forward one after another. The one in the center shouted, "We will fight side by side with the Supreme and battle the Wu and demon clans to the death." The 3,000 humans looked at the 3 human ancestors, then turned their steady eyes back toward me. Someone in the crowd shouted, "For the human race, kill!" The full 3,000 followed the 3 human ancestors and charged forward. At that moment, they no longer feared death. Their resolve to fight the Wu and demon clans until the very last drop of blood had never been stronger. They knew one thing with absolute certainty. As long as their supreme remained undefeated, the human race would endure. Watching the 3,000 humans race across the mountainside with their blood and courage fully awakened, I burst into laughter. This was the human race I would protect even if it cost me my life. The Wu and demons came at me like a dark flood, and in the blink of an eye, they entered my domain. The divine radiant sword Jufeng had unleashed stirred up a violent storm across the land. As a powerful expert of the Wu clan, she had long cultivated boundless killing intent, and now that killing intent spread along the blade itself, making the 3,000 humans' hearts pound with fear. Seeing that I still had not moved, Jufeng cried out sharply again, and even the tips of her feathers began to flow with the power of killing intent. The battlefield turned into an apocalyptic scene. Seas seemed to turn to dust, thunder transformed into an ocean, and destruction loomed over everything. Then Zhu Ying lunged across the sky. His enormous body descended in the blink of an eye, and from his mouths he spewed flames vast enough to cover the heavens. I raised one hand and by my strength alone shattered the divine radiant sword and extinguished the flames. That terrifying power instantly dissolved into nothingness, and both Zhu Ying and Jufeng froze in place. At the same time, a mysterious and majestic energy suddenly descended between heaven and earth. It carried a pressure so terrifying that it forced all beings into submission. The Wu and demons, racing low across the ground, were instantly smashed onto the earth, while those flying in the sky crashed down just as quickly. Every Wu and demon was shaken to the core. The Wu clan tried to use their strength, only to find that none of it responded. Their bodies could still move, but only barely, and each step covered no more than a few feet. The demons were even more horrified. All the laws they had comprehended could no longer be used, and the same was true for every powerful method they possessed. One especially strong demon tried with everything he had to unleash his power, only to produce a tiny spark. Murderous intent flashed through my eyes as I stepped forward. Wind, thunder, and clouds moved as one. The air itself began to shriek with supreme power. The instant my gaze shifted, heavenly thunder roared. The moment I raised my hand, lightning flashed like a divine blade splitting open the sky, and in an instant the entire firmament turned silver white, so brilliant that heaven and earth lost their color, and the mountains and rivers dimmed beneath it. I looked toward Jufeng and Juying, still suspended beyond my domain, and said coldly, "Whoever offends the human race shall be killed without mercy." My voice carried far, so far that it sounded like the whispers of 3,000 innate gods and demons from an age long before time. It seemed as though I was speaking to those two alone, and yet it also felt as though I were addressing the entire primordial world. The instant my words ended, I struck out with a palm through the air. Endless gray clouds gathered and transformed into a gigantic hand that came crashing down on the 1,000 demon elites below. At the same time, the invisible restraints within my domain tightened further. No matter how desperately the demons tried to flee, it was useless. Under normal circumstances, they could cross 10,000 li in an instant. But here, each step they took was no more than a few feet. Even burning their blood essence and pushing themselves to the limit, they still could not escape the reach of that gray cloud palm. Amid the chaos and terror, a streak of golden light tore through the void, ripping through time itself as it surged out of empty space. In the end, all 1,000 demons were crushed to death. My control over this power was becoming more and more refined. These enemies who delivered themselves to my door were turning into perfect whetstones for me. Across the shattered land, demon corpses lay everywhere. Xu Ying's body, massive as a mountain and carrying even a trace of dragon blood, had still been smashed to death alive. I stood proudly in the wind, my eyes incomparably firm. The killing intent pouring from me had become almost tangible, forming a thin blood-colored haze around my body. Wrapped in that overwhelming might, I struck again. With a single thought, a snow-white heavenly blade suddenly appeared in the void. Tao intent poured from it, dazzling beyond belief. In that instant, it felt as though ancient eternity and endless future were both contained within it. The force it gave off was so powerful that it left people dazed. I took a deep breath and lowered one finger. Pressure suddenly crashed down. Looking at the Wu warriors who were still struggling to escape, I laughed coldly. Go down and keep them company. With a thunderous explosion, every remaining Wu warrior felt their bodies sink, as though a mountain weighing tens of thousands of tons had been dropped onto their backs. The moment their feet touched the ground, deep pits opened beneath them. Grinding their teeth, they tried to move, but the restraints on them only grew stronger. The earth rumbled as though dragons were turning beneath it, and the entire Kongtong mountain shook violently. Under the horrified stares of the Wu clan, I poured out my power in a crushing torrent. The light was dazzling beyond words. Massive ravines spread across the ground like hideous scars, and no one knew how many Wu corpses fell into them, never to rise again. The humans, protected by golden light, withdrew safely from the destruction. More and more spheres of light floated upward, and at the edge of death, the 3,000 humans were still being sheltered by me. The giant cracks looked like black holes piercing the universe itself, constantly exhaling cold air from below as they spread like a spider's web. Fortunately, I moved quickly, and the 3,000 humans were not caught in the blast. Facing my overwhelming strength, the surviving Wu warriors were utterly terrified. They turned and tried to flee. But I stood there like a war god, my body wrapped in a mysterious aura no one could see through, an aura that pressed down on everyone who looked at me. For a time, the summit of Kongtong Mountain was filled with the Wu clan's screams, pleas for help, and endless chaos, all of it echoing through the sky. Great Witch Jufeng, save us! This human's power is not something we can fight against. The Wu warriors scattered in every direction, but their situation was even worse than the demons had been. With each step measuring less than half a foot, there was no escape. Overwhelming pressure fell from the heavens and surged up from the earth, enveloping every one of them. Their earlier arrogance had completely vanished. Now they wanted only one thing, to live. Some of them were already regretting ever coming to Kongtong Mountain in the first place. Retreat, too late. I lifted one foot and stomped through the air. In an instant, another terrifying phenomenon appeared. Countless giant divine swords materialized above, hanging high in the sky and carrying the world-ending force of a collapsing heaven. Since you came here, then die here. All of you will stay. Be buried with the humans you slaughtered. The clouds in the sky had only just begun to disperse, yet in the very next moment, 3,000 bolts of lightning gathered together and took the shape of a colossal foot before slamming downward, while thunder rolled endlessly across the heavens. The power of thunder instantly annihilated all 1,000 Wu warriors. On the summit of Kongtong Mountain, every Wu and demon that had charged forward was completely terrified. What kind of power was this? Just standing there, they felt as if the end of the world had arrived. Someone had actually used his own strength alone to face the combined assault of both the Wu and demon clans. At the same time, the countless races watching from the surrounding mountains and rivers high in the sky all saw it clearly. Above Kongtong Mountain stood a faint golden phantom shaped like a human. With a mere raise of its hand, heaven and earth seemed to collapse. It was overwhelmingly powerful. There was no smell of blood in the air. The terrifying thunder had instantly vaporized every Wu and demon corpse. As Chu Feng finished his move, the 3,000 bolts of lightning and the storm clouds gathered overhead gradually dispersed. The sun, which had vanished a moment ago, appeared once more. The entire battle had begun and ended in little more than a flash. Congratulations, host. You have obtained energy. Domain level upgraded to level 4. Domain range increased to a radius of 100 Lai. Chu Feng took a deep breath and looked over the barren plain ahead of him, his eyes still carrying a killing intent that made the heart tremble. As his domain advanced to level 4, he discovered that Zhu Feng and Zhu Ying had also been drawn into its range. He had been slightly worried those two might escape, so the moment he realized they were covered as well, he quietly let out a breath of relief. Across the heavens and the earth, mountains, rivers, streams, and land, both pure and foul, all seemed to glow in response to that pale golden phantom. In the blink of an eye, the laws within a radius of 100 li appeared to flow toward the foot of Kongtong Mountain. Unfortunately, the surrounding spectators could not see it clearly. Their strength was far from enough. Zhu Ying roared, his fury mixed with shock. He had brought so many demons with him, yet they had almost all been wiped out. But after that roar, neither he nor Zhu Feng made another move. The instant destruction of 2,000 golden immortals had shaken them to the core. Even though they themselves could also kill golden immortals, there was absolutely no way they could do it with Chu Feng's effortless ease. The two of them had already begun to think of retreating. Chu Feng slowly exhaled and rubbed his slightly sore wrist before shooting a cold glance at the two of them. He did not press down on them right away. As Daluo golden immortals, they were clearly far more valuable than the trash mobs he had just killed. Sweeping his gaze across the surrounding humans, Chu Feng narrowed his eyes. He was thinking about whether the flesh and blood of the Wu and demons could actually be used. In the sky, blinding runes and golden light still flickered and flowed. The dense power inside them made it impossible for the surrounding races to draw near. Now that the domain had grown stronger, everything within 100 li lay fully within Chu Feng's control. Meanwhile, the surviving Wu and demons who had not taken part in the attack had already fled the heart of destruction and were now hiding in panic behind Zhu Feng and Zhu Ying. They had roamed the primordial world for years, yet never once had they seen a human this powerful, nor one they had absolutely no way to resist. Then Zhu Feng's enormous body slammed into the ground. In an instant, mountains cracked and earth split apart. The laws around his body dimmed on the spot, and the power inside him began to fade away. Fear flashed through his eyes as he stared at Chu Feng, who remained calm and unhurried in every movement. At the same time, Zhu Ying also crashed heavily to the ground. The huge bodies of both figures sent up massive clouds of dust. The laws around them continued dimming until they were on the verge of extinction. The ground beneath them split open into terrifying pits from the force of their kneeling, the entire area already shattered into ruins. That single kneel had nearly torn their bodies apart. A sharp, bloody smell spread from the cracks in their flesh, only to turn into blood-red mist in the blink of an eye. They tried to stand up, but it was as if some invisible force had completely bound them in place. "If you've got the guts, then kill me," Zhu Ying roared. "I will never kneel to human ants." That furious roar shook heaven and earth and made the 3,000 humans tremble. Chu Feng raised his right hand. His fingertips moved as lightly as if skimming the surface of water, separating the terrifying chill in the air. Then he said coldly, "You will die, but not by my hand." As he lowered his eyes, great swaths of golden mist spread out from beneath his feet. Wherever the mist passed, cracks closed and plants sprang back to life. That miraculous scene made the 3,000 humans on Kongtong Mountain burst into cheers. Supreme Chu Feng, with a wave of his hand, all the Wu and demon corpses across the mountaintop vanished, and vitality returned to the land. That sight stunned the great powers of every race. Humans truly had it hard. Chu Feng deeply understood just how difficult things were for humanity in this era. Without the shelter of a true powerhouse, it was hard to imagine whether the human race would have already gone extinct. Before those thoughts had even faded, Chu Feng turned his head and looked at two of the three human ancestors. In the tone of the human supreme, he ordered, "Second ancestor. Third ancestor. Go cut off their heads." As he spoke, Chu Feng used his power again. Zhu Feng and Zhu Ying's enormous bodies instantly shrank down to the size of ordinary men. The second and third human ancestors clenched their teeth and walked forward, gripping the primitive weapons in their hands, tools sharpened from stone. Chu Feng closed his hand slightly, and in the next moment, Zhu Ying and Zhu Feng were dragged right in front of them. At the same time, Zhu Ying's 9 heads merged into one, and both of them took on ordinary forms. The second and third human ancestors exchanged a glance, then nodded. They raised their weapons high and slashed toward the two enemies' necks. A sharp metallic sound exploded into the air, and sparks flew. Their weapons were knocked aside one after another. Zhu Ying looked at the weapon that had bounced off his own body and sneered. "And ants like you want to kill me? Dream on." Zhu Feng's voice was filled with mockery and pride. Those crude mortal-made stones in your hands aren't even worth comparing to one of my feathers. My feathers are thousands of times sharper. Faced with the ridicule and laughter of the Wu and demons, the second and third human ancestors were momentarily at a loss. Looking at the broken stones near their feet, rage surged inside them. They had suffered oppression for so long, and now, even with the enemy placed right in front of them, they still could not kill him. The weakness of the human race stabbed deeply into their hearts. This was the strength of the Wu and demons. Even stripped down to their bodies alone, their flesh remained an overwhelming advantage. Chufeng opened his palm. 2 golden-patterned blades appeared within it. Those blades looked as though they had just been born from chaos itself. They were wrapped in faint golden mist and carried limitless killing power. Watching the smug Jufeng and Juying, Chufeng let the 2 blades float forward. When they stopped before the second and third human ancestors, he said, "Use these." Both golden blades looked extraordinary, glowing brilliantly from end to end. Even before touching them, one could feel a gentle warmth coming from their surfaces. The moment they saw them, the second and third human ancestors picked them up without hesitation and walked straight toward Juying and Jufeng. The instant they sensed the power hidden in those blades, Jufeng and Juying's expressions changed. With their strength, they could naturally tell that these were no ordinary weapons. As the shadows of the 2 humans fell over them, panic rose in their hearts. Standing before Juying and Jufeng, the second and third human ancestors were filled with fury. In their minds, they saw the humans who had once been dragged away, the children in their tribes, and all the suffering of the past playing before their eyes like flashing scenes. Their chests burned with hatred. Then both of them swung at the same time. A snow-white blade light slashed through the air and made it tremble. Sharp killing intent spread outward. The blades resonated with the years of hatred and fury in the hearts of the 2 ancestors. The golden patterns amplified their power, and the blade energy shook the void itself like a strike cutting across eternity. With a sharp sound, even the moisture in the air was instantly evaporated. The dazzling blade light flashed past in an instant. Juying and Jufeng's heads were cut off. But before the humans behind them could celebrate, the severed heads transformed in an instant into a massive serpent head and a phoenix head, their eyes still filled with fury. The second and third human ancestors were so startled that they stumbled backward several steps, but neither of them loosened their grip on the blades. At the same time, in the blink of an eye, Juying and Jufeng regrew new heads. Chufeng did not even bother reacting to the regeneration. He simply waved his hand. Flames burst upward from the ground. Orange-yellow fire billowed into the air, and the temperature of the surroundings rose sharply. Countless pieces of dry wood flew in from all directions and fed the flames until the fire grew larger and larger. Chufeng glanced at Jufeng and Juying, whose faces had already turned pale, then looked at the second and third human ancestors again and said, "Roast their heads and eat them. Share the meat with everyone." Hearing that, the 2 of them fixed vicious stares on Jufeng and Juying. In the end, they crushed down their fear of the Wu and demons and began preparing the severed heads. As members of the human race, handling phoenix heads and serpent heads was not difficult for them at all. In a short time, the heads were skinned, stripped, and divided into thousands of portions before being placed over the fire to roast. The sight was absolutely shocking. Chufeng had originally been a little worried that the serpent and phoenix heads might not be edible, but after personally tasting them, he was completely relieved. He then called over the first and second human ancestors and told them to keep going. Now that they had the blades, several dazzling flashes of white light swept down in succession, and more serpent heads and phoenix heads fell to the ground one after another. With Chufeng's power suppressing them, no matter how violently Jufeng and Juying struggled, the humans no longer feared them. After receiving approval from the first human ancestor, the other humans also rushed in and began chopping. Juying roared in fury, but his voice now sounded no different from that of an ordinary person. It no longer held the overwhelming force capable of destroying bodies with a single laugh. On the other side, Jufeng was equally enraged. He was a powerful figure of the Wu clan, a giant of the primordial world, and yet now his heads were being cut off and treated as meat. The 2 of them glared at the humans in front of them, but it was completely useless. No matter what methods they used, they could not break free. Very soon, both of them had 8 heads chopped off. At that point, real panic finally hit, because the moment the final head was cut off, they would truly die. At the same time, the countless races watching this scene from distant Dao grounds were equally stunned. In the primordial world, eating Wu and demons was not some unheard of thing. It was actually fairly common. But eating the heads that had just been cut off while the owners were still alive and watching, that had absolutely never happened before. And what made it even more unbelievable was that the ones doing it were humans, the weakest race among all the races. The onlookers watched as the humans swung their blades and split the heads apart. Thick blood immediately sprayed out. That blood contained rich, mysterious substances, and what spread through the air was not a foul, bloody smell, but a faint fragrance instead. Inside great iron pots, the flesh gave off dark, mist-like steam. The 3,000 humans ate with great satisfaction, grease shining at the corners of their mouths. Warm power began to circulate through their bodies, and brilliant blood-colored light overflowed outward from them. The power hidden inside that flesh had already been refined into an extremely pure form during the chopping process by the blades. It shone as brightly as thousands of suns. From above, it looked as though nearly every human who had eaten the meat was glowing from head to toe, with surging energy flowing from every pore. This was the benefit of consuming Wu and demon flesh. It brought enormous advantages to the human race. The bodies of all 3,000 humans were undergoing a qualitative transformation. That scene stunned all races, and the Wu and demons watching from afar were absolutely furious. Mere humans devouring the flesh and blood of the Wu and demons in front of all races? How arrogant. How could this possibly be tolerated? In the heavenly court, Eastern Emperor Taiyi was so enraged that the veins on his forehead bulged out. He had completely lost the detached majesty he usually maintained. The moment he roared, the image inside the viewing mirror shattered on the spot, and even the heavens seemed to shake. All the surrounding demons dropped in terror and bowed their heads. Then Taiyi gritted his teeth and shouted, "Come with me to Kongtong." On the other side, inside Panga Hall, a dense blood-red killing intent spread everywhere. Changliang, the ancestral witch, was so furious that his entire body trembled and his eyes were bloodshot as he snarled, "Human ants!" With that one roar, all of Pangu Hall shook violently. Thunder boomed in the sky, black clouds covered half the heavens, and terrifying pressure spread in every direction. The serpent-shaped treasure in his hand hissed and spat lightning, releasing Changliang's fury. The snake coiled around his thick arm tightened even more. Then Changliang turned and left, crossing 10,000 li in a single step, rolling thunder following in his wake and startling all races in every direction. Whether it was Changliang or Eastern Emperor Taiyi, both of them arrived at Kongtong Mountain almost instantly. The heavens split open. That crack was incomparably vast, like the eye of a god opening in the sky, radiating majestic and terrifying might. Eastern Emperor Taiyi stepped through golden light, divine rings trembling behind him and producing deafening dragon-like roars. Brilliant power blazed around his entire body. Shengliang also arrived, stepping onto a towering mountain tens of thousands of feet high. Rage spread wildly from his chest, and the giant serpent around his body instantly expanded until it wrapped around half the mountain. Eastern Emperor Taiyi himself has arrived. A great expert cried out in disbelief. He blinked, then once again used a spell mirror to look toward that incomparably majestic figure. Slowly adjusting the angle, he finally began to see Taiyi's face clearly. And in the very next second, Taiyi glared. The mirror shattered instantly. Then terrifying power surged out from the broken mirror. The might of a quasi-saint crossed through the void itself. There had been no actual contact at all, yet a single furious stare was already enough to destroy heaven and earth. In the next moment, that observing expert was instantly annihilated. He had offended Eastern Emperor Taiyi and was treated as nothing more than an ant to vent anger upon. At the same time, Changliang stood atop that towering peak while the giant serpent wound around it flicked its cold tongue. The quasi-saint pressure spreading from Changliang was equally overwhelming, but he had no interest in the spying gazes of the surrounding races. His eyes were fixed only on Chufeng, who still showed no trace of fear. The moment Jufeng and Ju Ying saw Eastern Emperor Taiyi and Changliang, it was like seeing hope itself. They desperately cried for help. They truly could not endure this anymore. The human standing before them was too vicious. He was actually letting people eat the heads cut off from their bodies right in front of them. It was beyond terrifying. In the past, they had always been the ones above others, devouring the weak without mercy. But now they themselves had become prey on the chopping block. All their earlier arrogance and rage had completely vanished. Taiyi glanced coldly at Ju Ying. Then the demon marshal raised his head, his eyes vast as though they contained countless stars, and stared at Chufeng while shouting, "Human ant, you actually dare eat a demon marshal of the heavenly court? Release him at once!" His voice carried the pressure of a quasi-saint, and entire mountain ranges shook in response. From the distant high mountain, Changliang also roared, "Release my sister, or I will slaughter your entire human race." At that very moment, the giant serpent coiled around the mountain suddenly opened its mouth and spat out a tree-thick bolt of thunder, shaking heaven and earth with a single blast. The 3,000 humans trembled uncontrollably, and the chunks of meat in their hands suddenly felt too heavy to eat. The pressure crashing down on them made it seem as if time and space had frozen, as though even breathing had become unbearably difficult. And yet, even under the combined pressure of two quasi-saints, Chufeng showed no fear at all. He only let out a cold laugh and said, If the Wu and demons are allowed to slaughter humans, then why can't the human race eat the Wu and demons? Before his words had even fully faded, Chu Feng looked toward the second and third human ancestors, who were still holding the golden blades, and ordered them to strike again. This time, he told them to cut off the final heads of Jufeng and Juying. The two ancestors exchanged a glance, then quickly stepped forward. Before Jufeng and Juying could cry out again, the blades fell. Two dull thuds rang out. The last two heads dropped instantly. Blood erupted from the perfectly clean cuts like exploding flowers, and in an instant, the entire area looked like a living Asura battlefield. Golden blood poured out so fast it nearly formed a river, and the terrifying aura it released made even the watching races shudder. The countless onlookers of the primordial world were stunned. They had actually been executed on the spot, right in front of everyone. Even with Eastern Emperor Taiyi and the ancestral witch Changliang personally present, Chu Feng still dared to act this fiercely. All the races watching were horrified. This human was way too savage. With the final head severed, Zhu Ying and Jufeng's life force completely vanished. Their eyes remained open, filled with unwillingness, humiliation, and hatred. And the moment the two of them truly died, the domain absorbed enough power once again. Congratulations, host. You have obtained energy. Domain level upgraded to level 5. Domain range increased to a radius of 1,000 Li. As the domain rose another level, Chu Feng instantly felt the range of his control become much wider. He could now sense even the fish and shrimp moving between mountains and rivers with perfect precision. When he lifted his head and glanced at Eastern Emperor Taiyi before turning his eyes toward Changliang, he could not help but feel a little regret. Neither Taiyi nor Changliang had entered the 1,000 Li range of his domain. Originally, he had intended to use the torture and execution of Juying and Jufeng as bait, drawing in more Wu and demon experts, killing them, gathering more energy, and leveling up even further before continuing the hunt. But he had not expected that both Eastern Emperor Taiyi and Qiangliang would be so cautious. The instant they descended, they deliberately kept their distance. Because of that alone, the entire follow-up plan fell apart. As expected of the supreme overlords of the primordial world, Chu Feng could only sigh inwardly. If it had been anyone else, they would have already rushed forward in blind rage, whether because the honor of the demon race had been damaged or because their own sister had been humiliated. But these two were calm to the point of being excessive. Chu Feng knew they had most likely already sensed that something was wrong. And more importantly, the little bit of distance between them meant nothing to beings like Taiyi and Changliang. For them, crossing that gap in an instant was no problem at all. On top of that, the Wu clan specialized in wielding the power of laws. A quasi-saint like Changliang would naturally be far stronger than the Wu commander Chu Feng had killed earlier. Even so, publicly torturing and executing Juying and Jufeng had still completely enraged both Taiyi and Changliang. Under that heavenly fury, Changliang moved first. The thunder power he had already been gathering had long since reached its peak. The sky above shimmered with light as vast power rotated within it. Countless runes of the Tao of Thunder became clearly visible, to the point that even Chu Feng felt a trace of admiration. As expected of a quasi-saint who specialized in thunder, the moment he acted, a thunder sea spread across 10,000 li like the apocalypse itself. The horrifying lightning overhead was still gathering, and then, with a deafening explosion, the runes and laws within it surged toward the summit of Kongtong Mountain, like a blade splitting open the heavens. The scene was utterly shocking. At the same time, the giant serpent coiled around the mountain opened its blood-red jaws and spat out a silver beam from between its fangs. It flashed out like an aurora, crushing everything in its path. You butchered my kin and treated them like swine and insects. How dare lesser beings offend those above them, die? Two overwhelming attacks erupted one after another, and the pressure of a quasi-saint was revealed without restraint. The Sea of Thunder and the Silver Aurora intertwined, and the law power they formed together was terrifying beyond measure. Even without being directly targeted, the mere aftershocks of those laws were already enough to shatter an entire mountain range. In an instant, rivers flowed backward, countless streams were evaporated, and the world boiled into mist. Xiangliang's fury could shake the sky, and his power seemed capable of splitting heaven itself. Now that he had fully unleashed it, the scene became dazzling beyond words, as though a pure thunder world had descended to suppress Kongtong Mountain. The experts of the surrounding races who were too close all felt the full crushing pressure of a quasi-saint. Even the void itself began to split, and strands of black aura leaked out from within the cracks. The oppressive force falling from above made them feel like they could not breathe. They wanted nothing more than to flee this place immediately. The momentum of that attack reached Kongtong Mountain first. In the raging winds, no grass or tree remained standing. Giant boulders were ground into powder by the storm and erased in an instant. At that moment, the 3,000 humans on the summit could barely breathe at all beneath the quasi-saint pressure. The horrifying aura was still radiating outward. In that instant, Many of the powerful beings watching from afar shut their eyes by reflex. The thunder was too blinding and the pain in their eyes was unbearable. Some people's eyes were already bleeding. They were shaken to the core. Changliang's blood energy roared like a vast sea, and now that he had gone all out, even his blood had turned golden as it surged and rolled through his body. He stood there like a supreme existence from before eternity, one prepared to sweep away all creation. Several nearby great powers could not endure it. Their bodies split apart on the spot, and before they could even react, the thunder and the shockwaves reached them and wiped them out instantly. Even worse, some experts had tried to cast protective barriers over their own clans, only for those protections to collapse and explode as if they had never existed. Then Changliang roared. That roar was so terrifying that it shattered the black storm pouring from the void. The silver storm of law turned into runes and smashed deep into empty space, sending out echoes so frightening that they sounded like the sky itself screaming back. All races were horrified. Among them were even beings close to the quasi-saint level, yet after seeing Changliang unleash his full strength like this, they still felt they were no match for him. By now, Changliang's blood energy had become dazzling, and silver blood surged visibly through his body. Even lightning was condensing and weaving itself between his pores. Many powerful beings among the myriad races felt their hearts sink. That was a sign that his laws were being pushed to the absolute limit, to the point where he himself had become part of them. On the summit of Kongtung Mountain, the protection the humans had previously been relying on finally shattered under Changliang's fierce assault. In that instant, terror fell over the 3,000 humans. But just then, Chufeng moved. With a wave of his hand, he sent out 3,000 streams of power from his palm, each transforming into a golden barrier to shield one human. The moment that power descended, the crushing pressure and the heart-shaking force around them vanished completely. The 3,000 humans gradually recovered. When they looked up, the sky above had become like a cracked mirror, as if the slightest touch would shatter it completely. Silver lightning still spread through the void, threatening to radiate all the way to the edge of boundless space. Everyone watching felt as if Changliang had gone mad. The races of the primordial world were stunned. That was Changliang, one of the famous quasi-saints of the primordial world, and now he was unleashing all his power in a state so wild it bordered on frenzy. He was clearly trying to force his strength to the absolute limit and wipe out the entire human race in one strike. And then Chufeng made his move. He took a single step. The surrounding space rippled in layers. In the distance, the mingled sea of thunder laws was already rushing toward him with terrifying clarity, sweeping over everything like an end-of-days disaster, even worse than the apocalypse itself. In the eyes of countless onlookers, the humans were finished. Against a quasi-saint going all out like Changliang, even other quasi-saints among the myriad races might not be able to win, much less the weak human race. But Chufeng simply took a deep breath. Some mysterious power was being drawn out around him. Even his hair began to shine with golden light, each strand crystal bright. His eyes opened and closed with great power flowing through them, while mist rolled from his body, making him look both mysterious and sacred. Then he charged straight toward the roaring sea of thunder laws. He opened his mouth, and in the next moment, an unimaginably terrifying suction force burst out. With one savage breath, he swallowed every bit of power that had entered the sky above his domain. At that moment, dawn-like, Shaguang burst into the air, brilliant and dazzling. The overwhelming laws that had filled the heavens sank into him like rivers flowing into the sea, turning into pure energy and being devoured completely by Chufeng. In the distance, Eastern Emperor Taiyi immediately realized something was wrong, yet he still did not move. In the blink of an eye, every ounce of power Changliang had unleashed was swallowed and dissolved by Chufeng. The deafening thunder vanished. Heaven and earth fell into sudden silence. All the races of the primordial world stared at the scene in utter disbelief. The battle had ended in an instant. It had arrived like some ancient world-devouring beast, and then vanished as quietly as spring rain. For a moment, all sounds in the world were gone. The countless races could only stare blankly. And as the one who had cast the attack, Changliang himself was even more stunned, confusion and shock mixing in his face. A mere human ant had actually swallowed his power. Even the great experts of all races could not believe their eyes. The weak human race had casually resolved the full-force strike of a quasi-saint as if it were nothing. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it. And even after seeing it, they still did not want to accept it. Worse still, the one who had done it was a human. As for Chufeng, after swallowing that ocean-like torrent of law power, he showed no sign of discomfort whatsoever. He looked almost like a man who had simply finished a satisfying meal, and he even let out a small burp. That tiny motion instantly dragged Changliang back to reality. His face turned so ugly it almost twisted, and then a raging fury like heaven-burning fire rose from his chest. This was humiliation. A human had mocked him without even needing words, and he had done it in front of all races. Chu Feng casually raised his hand and wiped the last trace of lightning from the corner of his mouth. Then he looked toward Changliang with a cold smile and said, "So this is all a quasi-saint can do?" That one sneer pierced Changliang's heart like a sword stabbing through the sky. The pain was unbearable. By now, Changliang was completely certain that the attack he had just released was enough to kill 10 top experts from the myriad races, yet Chu Feng had treated it like a snack. Seeing that Changliang was trembling with fury but still refusing to move, Chu Feng's expression turned colder, and he stopped speaking. He had to admit it. Changliang and Eastern Emperor Taiyi's caution really was troublesome. They were clearly not far from the edge of the domain, yet neither of them was willing to step inside. Even after Changliang had attacked like that, he still had not entered. If he had, Chu Feng would not have needed to simply swallow thunder power. Things would have ended very differently. At that very moment, the Eastern Emperor finally acted. Looking down at Changliang, he let out a cold snort. The Wu clan really is full of trash. You can't even deal with a single human. Changliang forced down his rage at the mockery. He knew perfectly well that in a one-on-one fight, he was not Taiyi's opponent. Then sacred and dazzling divine patterns burst from Taiyi's body. In the next instant, Eastern Emperor Taiyi brought out the Eastern Emperor Bell. The moment the bell appeared, the gloomy sky was swept clean. A blazing purple light spread out in every direction, covering the entire heaven and turning mountains and rivers pale. The whole earth was instantly submerged in a mysterious, hazy mist. The pressure of a top-tier quasi-saint swept through every corner of the forests and mountains, driving everything else away. Within layers of purple ripples, the Eastern Emperor Bell displayed its own absolute majesty. Then Taiyi used his method and drew the bell out from the ripples completely. A deep hum rang out. Waves spread in every direction like visible sound, covering heaven and earth in the blink of an eye. The bell's resonant ripples swept over all creation. Wherever they passed, all things withered, mountains collapsed, rivers reversed, and everything in existence was suppressed. On the summit of Kongtung Mountain, the 3,000 humans immediately felt an endless and terrifying force. In the blink of an eye, the Eastern Emperor Bell was already hanging above the mountain peak. The sound waves were still spreading outward, and some humans could no longer bear it. They fell to their knees, clutching their ears and crying out in agony, roaring in pain as if their eardrums were about to burst. Even Changliang, a quasi-saint himself, felt a boundless pressure and was inwardly shaken. He realized that as long as Taiyi held the Eastern Emperor Bell, he would never be his match. His eyes were filled with deep fear and caution. As for the surrounding races, they were even more terrified. They could all feel the oppression coming not only from Taiyi himself, but from the Eastern Emperor Bell as well. Setting aside the fact that Taiyi was already one of the top quasi-saints in the world, the Bell's origin alone was monstrous. As one of the 3 great innate treasures of the primordial world, the Eastern Emperor Bell possessed world-destroying force the moment it was unleashed. And once wielded by a quasi-saint like Taiyi, it was even capable of contending with a saint. This was the true foundation of the heavenly court. No one knew how that human had managed to neutralize Changliang's attack. But now that Taiyi had personally taken action with the Eastern Emperor Bell in hand, surely this really was the end. Some great power muttered in the shadows that whether Taiyi holding the Eastern Emperor Bell could rival a saint was no longer even a question. Even a quasi-saint among the myriad races spoke in a low voice. So what if that human possessed power comparable to a quasi-saint? Eastern Emperor Taiyi was no ordinary quasi-saint. As the bell's resonance spread, the consciousness of all living things began to blur. Everyone struggled desperately. Some nearby onlookers had the corners of their eyes split open because they were too close and could not withstand the bell's sound waves. Their bodies exploded on the spot, and they died full of hatred. Taiyi roared and fully activated the Eastern Emperor Bell. Its waves rolled across the earth. But at that exact moment, Chu Feng moved. From within the void, a massive golden hand suddenly stretched out as if some ancient being from before time itself had made its move. It descended carrying a mysterious and terrifying power. The sound waves of the Eastern Emperor Bell were shattered on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the bell's resonance collapsed completely, unable to resist in the slightest. Then Chu Feng's voice rang out. "Many thanks to the Eastern Emperor for the gift. I won't be polite. I'll be taking this." That golden hand roared forward and instantly seized the Eastern Emperor Bell. Then it dropped downward in one violent pull. Faced with that overwhelming force, the bell struggled with all its might, but it was completely useless. The moment he saw the Eastern Emperor Bell being snatched away, Eastern Emperor Taiyi was shocked. He immediately drove his own power forward, trying to pull it back. Quasi-saint force surged out and collided head-on with Chu Feng's power. But no matter how violently the Eastern Emperor Bell struggled, and no matter how fiercely Taiyi tried to reclaim it, the treasure still could not break free. Seeing this, Chu Feng no longer bothered dragging things out. He barked a command. The Eastern Emperor Bell, which had originally been enormous enough to cover 10,000 zhang, instantly shrank to the size of an ordinary little bell. Violent secret power still swirled around it, but it was now firmly trapped in Chu Feng's grasp. High in the sky, when Tai Yi saw the Eastern Emperor bell being forcefully taken away, his face changed dramatically. Then he exploded in rage. The vast secret power and force around his body erupted together, and his fury shook the entire primordial world. It was not only the mountains and the earth that felt it, even the heavenly. Court itself could sense the storm of anger rising from deep within Eastern Emperor Tai Yi's heart. Compared to Zhu Ying being tortured and killed, the loss of the Eastern Emperor bell enraged him far more. Meanwhile, Chu Feng held the bell in his hand and sneered. The Eastern Emperor bell was still struggling, but once it was already in his palm, where could it possibly escape to? Looking at how violently it resisted, Chu Feng waved his hand and forcibly erased Tai Yi's imprint from it. The moment that imprint was wiped away, the Eastern Emperor bell gradually calmed down. The vibrations and sound waves that had been trembling around it fell silent at once. Looking at the bell in his hand, Chu Feng said coldly, "Within my domain, let alone an innate treasure, even your master himself." At the same moment, Tai Yi suddenly spat out a huge mouthful of bright red blood. His imprint on the Eastern Emperor bell was linked directly to his own body and soul. Now that it had been forcibly erased, he suffered a backlash instantly. Cracks even began spreading across the surface of Tai Yi's body. The violent backlash had seriously wounded him. The Eastern Emperor is injured. The great powers of all races were terrified. The human supreme had actually injured the Eastern Emperor of the demon race. Even the hidden quasi-saints were shaken. This was absolutely the kind of event that would shake the entire primordial world, because the one who had been wounded was none other than the strongest being beneath the saints in the current age. Looking at the cracks splitting open across his palm and body, Eastern Emperor Tai Yi himself was equally stunned. He possessed the body of a quasi-saint, yet a backlash had actually caused it to split apart. Qiang Liang, who had watched the whole thing happen, was also deeply shaken. As a quasi-saint, he knew exactly how terrifying Tai Yi's body was. And yet now, because of backlash alone, Tai Yi had been injured. Qiang Liang no longer dared to attack rashly. He stared at the human in front of him, and for the first time, the urge to retreat rose in his heart. As for Chu Feng, having just seized the Eastern Emperor bell, he did not care in the slightest about Tai Yi's rage. With a casual squeeze of his hand, a gleaming cord appeared. He threaded it through the small hole at the top of the bell and even chuckled as he did it. This little bell isn't bad. Then, with a flick of his hand, he tied up his loose hair using the Eastern Emperor bell as if it were nothing more than a hair ornament. A light breeze blew past behind him, and he looked indescribably refreshed. The watching races were utterly stunned. They simply could not believe that one of the great innate treasures of the primordial world had just been casually used by a human as a decorative hair tie. This human was absurdly arrogant, and among the great powers of all races, that single scene left a deeper shock than anything before it. Now that the entire world had witnessed just how powerful that human was, and with his own Eastern Emperor bell being used as nothing more than a hair ornament, Eastern Emperor Tai Yi completely lost it. Rage surged straight into his chest, his blood energy turned chaotic, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. Even as a quasi-saint, his face had turned a little pale. "Ant!" he roared. "You are far too arrogant!" Chu Feng only glanced at him and said nothing, though inwardly he felt more than a little helpless. The Eastern Emperor bell really was a great treasure, but unfortunately it was useless to him. Inside his domain, he was invincible, so any outside treasure was just icing on the cake. But outside this place, he was basically no different from a mortal. Forget an innate supreme treasure like the Eastern Emperor bell. Even a much weaker magic treasure would be impossible for him to activate. In the distance, Qiang Liang also realized that there was no way he could deal with this human by force alone. A thought appeared in his mind. Suppressing his fury, he forced his tone to calm down a little and said, "Return my sister's corpse to me, and I will leave immediately." The races watching from all sides were instantly shaken. Was Qiang Liang backing down? Some of the stronger observers were horrified. Had even a quasi-saint begun to yield? Could it be that this human ant truly possessed the power to kill a quasi-saint? Although it was true that Chu Feng had seized the Eastern Emperor bell, they still found it hard to believe that he could actually kill someone at the quasi-saint level. After all, beneath the saints, quasi-saints stood at the very peak of the world, beings few could rival. "And what if I refuse?" Chu Feng said with a mocking smile. "You came here to invade the human race, and now with just a few casual words, you expect me to hand over her corpse? Idiot! Ant!" Qiang Liang, who had just barely calmed himself, exploded again the instant he heard that. He roared in fury, "Return her at once! Otherwise the armies of the Wu clan will descend and trample the entire region of Kongtong Mountain into dust." But Chu Feng ignored him completely. He turned around and looked at the humans, whose faces still carried fear, but who were forcing themselves to stand tall through pure anger and hatred. Then he ordered, Second ancestor, third ancestor, build up the fire and eat the meat. He clearly intended to provoke them even further. He directly ordered the 3,000 humans to turn Zhufeng into roasted meat. For the second and third human ancestors, eating meat was naturally no unpleasant task. They immediately called over the humans and began skinning Zhufeng, pulling out the tendons, chopping the body into pieces, and placing the cuts over the fire. Now that they had experience, they were unbelievably skilled. In the distance, Changliang was already beyond furious. Staring at Zhufeng's corpse being carved apart, his eyes split with rage. Vast thunder surged around him once again, and crimson radiance began to gush from his body, dyeing the surrounding sky in a scene that was both magnificent and terrifying. At the same time, Eastern Emperor Taiyi's eyes narrowed. A horrifying aura spread silently through the sky. He was clearly laying out something above, ruthless and vicious, wanting to wipe out the entire human race in one stroke. Before long, Zhufeng's flesh was roasted through. The meat was crystal red, tender, and glowed with flowing rays of light. Even before anyone took a bite, the essence within its aroma was already beginning to improve the humans' constitutions. It was enough to make anyone drool. Don't waste the little bones either, third ancestor leaned over and told the nearby humans. Crush them up and swallow them too. A vast, warm power flowed through their bodies, making them feel as though they were soaking in a hot spring. By now, the entire summit of Kongtung Mountain was overflowing with the fragrance of roasted meat. The glowing flesh had become even more golden and glossy. This was no ordinary meat. It carried the pure bloodline of the Wu clan, second only to the 12 ancestral witches themselves. Strands of radiant light kept rising from it. The leg meat and wing meat were the best parts. Fat dripped into the flames with a rich, sizzling sound that made mouths water. This was absolutely supreme nourishment. Once eaten, it would make a person's blood essence surge and their strength soar, drastically improving their physique. And compared to that, Zhu Ying's flesh was even more dazzling. The demon had been stewed into soup. The broth was rich, thick, and unbelievably fragrant, carrying a sweet aroma unlike anything they had ever smelled before. The humans were overjoyed. Some of them found the snake meat too tough to bite through, so they borrowed the golden blades to chop it apart before putting it back into the pot to boil. As the soup simmered, the oil from the snake meat slowly rose to the surface, and a faint reddish glow reflected across the faces of the 3,000 humans. Once it looked ready, third ancestor scooped out a huge piece of meat and started eating with complete abandon. The first bite made him let out a deeply satisfied groan. That single mouthful made every pore in his body open up. It was indescribably comfortable, a true delicacy beyond compare. The meat was soft and pink, melting the instant it entered the mouth, and hidden between the layers of flesh were little golden specks filled with rich essence. It's too good. Eat the wings. That's where the best meat is. The 3,000 humans ate with absolute joy. Some swallowed the snake gall, and instantly their entire bodies burst with radiant light. Thick, murky mist spilled from their pores, while the bones in their bodies seemed to crack like thunder. That was the true essence of the soup. It might not have been the tastiest part, but it was definitely the most precious. The surrounding races were so stunned they could barely even process what they were seeing. These humans were simply too bold. They had turned Zhufeng and Zhu Ying into a feast. And yet, even while they were horrified by the human savagery, they could not help feeling a deep envy. Those were Zhufeng and Zhu Ying, after all. Their flesh and blood would bring enormous benefits to anyone who consumed them. At this moment, the two angriest beings in all heaven and earth were Changliang and Eastern Emperor Taiyi. In the distance, Changliang kept roaring in fury, wishing he could shatter the mountains and rivers and pierce the sky itself. Lightning blazed all over his body. Every hair on him seemed ready to stand on end, and even the giant serpent in his hand was being squeezed so hard that it had nearly lost its shape. He was on the verge of going mad. These humans were too vicious. They were actually eating his sister's flesh in public, and they were doing it with such brazen dominance that it made him cough blood. His body trembled, and several bolts of thunder burst out of him uncontrollably. They exploded across the ground with deafening force, shattering vast stretches of mountain and river. Countless hidden creatures from the surrounding races were wiped out instantly. Those bolts of lightning were as thick as cages and terrifying beyond words. High above, Eastern Emperor Taiyi was no calmer. The divine rings behind him trembled violently, releasing endless brilliant radiance that covered half the sky. Both of them were now gathering terrifying power. Their anger had reached the absolute limit. Then, as Changliang watched Zhufeng's corpse continue to be carved apart, he could not bear it any longer. Rage completely smothered his reason. Wrapped in endless thunder and heaven-shaking killing intent, he shot straight toward Zhufeng. His hair was disheveled, murderous light burst from his eyes as fast as lightning, and it condensed into a silver line sharp enough to shatter the mountain beneath him. This attack was even fiercer than the one before, like a divine spear from myth itself, sharp enough to make the soul shiver. Even if it struck a quasi-saint, survival would be difficult. Blood filled Changliang's eyes until his vision itself seemed painted in red fire. He was furious beyond measure. The human race deserves extermination. That single roar shook all races. Sound waves became visible ripples that spread in all directions. Vast green lands collapsed in an instant. Thunderlight poured down from the heavens in sheets. With a deafening crash, countless bolts of lightning as thick as giant dragons smashed into the earth, blasting out enormous smoking pits one after another. In that moment, the world really did seem to have entered the apocalypse. All living things trembled. Facing the charging Changliang, the 3,000 humans also tensed themselves for battle. The radiant light flowing from their bodies gathered together and actually formed a bloody curtain of light. Their expressions turned cold and furious. Back then, the Wu and demons had slaughtered humans with such cruelty, yet now the human race had only returned a fragment of that debt, and they were already facing extermination again. Where was the justice in that? They all looked toward the direction Changliang was charging from. At the same time, the two giant serpents beside him also moved. Their bodies swelled larger once more, like mountain peaks tens of thousands of feet high in motion. As they dragged themselves across the earth, they carved enormous trenches into the ground. It was a terrifying sight. Even the scarlet tongues they flicked carried enough destructive force to ruin an entire region. At any moment, they could join with Changliang and unleash a combined strike. Thunderlight had already erupted through the sky, silver and blazing, illuminating the entire land. In the blink of an eye, Changliang arrived. He came wrapped in countless thunder manifestations, fury mixed into every bit of it, determined to destroy every single human. One step from him was enough to change the color of mountains and rivers. The sky lost its light. Thick black clouds rolled across the heavens, while endless black smoke spread over the earth and turned into a mist that swallowed the plain. The first thing to enter the domain was that black fog. It was terrifying beyond belief. Lightning was mixed inside it, and wherever it passed, all things were annihilated. At the same time, the two massive serpents twisted within the darkness, flicking their scarlet tongues. The human race must die. Changliang roared again as he descended in full. But the instant he stepped into my domain, everything changed. His body, which had been floating in the air, suddenly dropped straight to the ground. The murderous thunderlight around him began to die out on the spot. The sky-filling lightning, the black mist, the rolling storm clouds, all of them burst apart in an instant. Sunlight poured back down from above. His enormous body shrank in the blink of an eye to the size of an ordinary man, and from a height of 10,000 meters, he crashed heavily downward,